Tjena.
Du kan alltid få dem med.
Ja. Det spelas in. Nej, jag åt på det här
Nils-Erik, du kan säkert gå och ta en macka. Det är ju inte alls många som har dykt upp. Så ställer några extra också.
Jag kommer direkt till utbildningsråd. Det går jag.
Innan man ska
Ready when you are, sen kommer jag.
slutfasen av en code. Det är ganska tufft.
Jag tänker ni har bara vigat på
det är nackdel över
det gäller att försöka. Jag tänker också. Jag insåg idag att jag inte hade sagt något.
Det är väl lika bra vi väntar till de har ihop sig.
Ja, jag tänker det.
Det ligger ute nu.
Jag kan ta den andra.
Är det med dig?
Hallå, håller det på ända till ett eller? Jag måste vara på jag sitter här någonstans och det syns.
Det behöver du inte oroa dig. Hon klättrar när hon ska sätta sig längst.
Så det var för att jag skulle smita.
ingen kontroll. Nej, ingen kontroll. Det är det som man gillar. No control. Ingen fara. Det ger bara lite extra liv till film. Fast vi använder inte dem. Nej, vi använder inte den rumsmicken. Vi kör med bara dem där. Plus en i kameran. Mats Hoas på Markmästeriet. Mats på Markmästeriet. Jag frågade så här liksom, det finns ju inget sätt att tappa ljudet här liksom, eller har du någon mer bara? Har du någon kabel jag kan skala? Har jag den? Jag kommer dit. Jag satt den här, skala lite kabel, tjabade på lite, sen fixar jag. Underbar människa. Ja. Ja.
Hello and welcome. Not only because of the very nice view, but also because this is actually a new beginning, even though it's the same format for the Educate events that we usually have one per semester. It's a new topic. We felt that we wanted to take a little break from AI and the discussions about that and talk a little bit about other things that are happening around us and that are going on. So today we're talking about constructive alignment. We started with the question, have you ever designed a course that you were really proud of, or a module or a learning activity that you were really proud of, only to wonder why it seems like the students missed the point? And that's where we started. But it's, of course, a larger question than that as well. But it does feel nice with a change of topic.
It seems like a very good idea because we won't run away from AI anyways. We need to deal with it. But we can't stop thinking about all other things that are important in education. So hopefully this will be a new beginning on a nice and interesting discussion. I hope we'll get back to it later as well. Would you like for me to say something about the people we invited?
Please do.
And some of them you actually know already, like Timur, from NUF. And we have Patrick from JTH. And they represent different areas, obviously, but also different experiences that I think will be very rewarding for us to listen to today. But then I also have a lovely colleague from Göteborg, Sylva. And she's, anthropologist from the beginning and has been doing a lot of, leadership stuff, if you can put it that simple way. I think it's easy if you explain it. And currently, she's doing roughly what I'm doing now. So you are the director of PIL-enheten, the unit working with teaching and academic teaching and learning in Gothenburg. I'm so grateful that you could, all three of you, come. Hi, welcome, have some food and have a seat. But I think I'll hand back to Carl-Johan. Would you like for me to shut this one off or just leave it?
So we were thinking about different topics. What would it be interesting to talk about? And as we were discussing this in our group, we were thinking that there's a lot of planning going on. There's a lot of quality assurance work. There's a lot of that stuff going on. And we started also thinking about the gap between what we intend students to learn and what our course design actually makes possible. Not that there might be a conflict, but we wanted to talk a little bit about how this happens and introduce a theory, which it is, that's called constructive alignment. And I thought that it's best to start with brushing up a little bit on what constructive alignment is before we get going with the discussions. I also created a little cheat sheet, that's hard to say, isn't it? Cheat sheet for you with a constructive alignment process. I've tried to boil it down into its most simple constituents. So please excuse me if I haven't fully and accurately portrayed all of this, because this is actually something that has been developing for quite a long time. In the 1990s, this started kind of bubbling up as a theory. Now, the basic idea is basically that everything is supposed to agree with each other in planning a course, planning a program, planning a module, planning examinations, and all of it kind of fits together. So when we ask the question, what is constructive alignment? The answer is that we want to align the intended learning outcomes, the teaching activities, the assessments and feedback, so that they work together towards the same goal. We start by defining what students should be able to do. Then we teach the students how to do it. And then we make assessments that make that learning visible somehow. And when I say make it visible, that could mean that we can measure it somehow. The point is that everything points in the same direction. In the smaller activity, in the course overall, and in the program, and maybe even national learning objectives. We'll get into those discussions a little bit later with the panel. This is something that you often see when you search around and try to grasp what constructive alignment is. The intended learning outcomes leading to the construction of assessment and criteria leading to the design of learning activities. And what we're talking about today is the designing, not the actual carrying out of education, but we're talking about the design, at least when it comes to these steps. This is the order of designing, creating. Then, of course, after performing the learning activity comes actually carrying out the assessments, measuring the criteria, and giving feedback. Something that I also hope to discuss in today's panel discussion is how invisible skills play into this, how they are connected. Skills that sometimes or oftenly are referred to as transferable skills. Because the idea here is that there is some type of progression designed, that we start with the foundation. If we look to Bloom's taxonomy, which is a description that you might have seen as a pyramid before, there is a foundation of knowledge and understanding, which we also mimic through the Bologna process and through the national criteria for the degrees into knowledge and understanding, skills and abilities, and judgment and approach. This foundation, often described as knowledge, understanding, where we have the quantitative aspects of knowledge, is considered to be needed before we can progress into the qualitative aspects, where we, instead of listing, describing, reiterating, memorizing, which are the very basics of learning and maintaining quantities of knowledge, mean that we can actually apply it and use it somehow. The qualitative aspects, where we can compare, contrast, analyze, create based on our knowledge and understanding. But this often happens in assessments and learning activities where you are expected to discuss, partake in group projects, caseworks. Now, that begs the question if we teach those skills, or if they are somehow hidden somewhere, invisible skills. The same transferable skills that we sometimes also expect of students to already have when they arrive here. Even if we also say that they're absolutely necessary for their profession later on. These are transferable skills that you perhaps could use everywhere, but they might also be invisible. Now, I've mentioned both in the cheat sheet and now 2 different ways of describing knowledge. One, when we create the intended learning outcomes, Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is often used when constructing learning outcomes, describing what you are expected to be able to do. They are action verbs, verbs that you can carry out somehow. And these verbs were systematically described by Bloom, and then later on in Bloom's revised taxonomy, 2011-ish, more systematically described in different domains and what you're expected to be able to do. They're not always very successful for actually observing if you do it or not. It can become complicated. Bloom's taxonomy, it tells students what to do and teachers what to teach. But then in the assessment, we want to make things observable. In the cheat sheet, you can see a model of solo taxonomy, structure of observed learning outcomes. And the idea here is that these are those levels that I was describing earlier. The quantitative knowledge as the foundation, and the change from one step to another. The first step in solo taxonomy is also described in the theme of today's session. When we observe that students don't know or don't understand, they missed the point. Even though I had spent a lot of time to design, they missed the point. You might have spoken with a person where you think, they're missing the point. They don't understand. This person does not know what they're talking about. And this is the starting point for these observable outcomes. The next step is a quantifiable one, if they have knowledge about this or not. Then we can have multi-structural systems of knowledge. They can fit into our mental schemes or building blocks, into our model, and we can fit lots of different knowledge in there. Lots of facts, information, different theories, different ways of looking at it. But they might not be interrelated. To explain the transition from quantitative knowledge to qualitative knowledge, for Swedes I often use an example that has to do with the year 1632. Does anyone know what happened in 1632? Gustavus Adolphus died. Yes, where? Lützen. Dimman låg tät över Lützen. The fog lay heavy over Lützen. Yes. These are usually facts that Swedes have memorized from their education, secondary school, high school, before that even perhaps. And then you ask relational questions about this knowledge to see if they can describe how all of these facts fit together. What the big conclusion of these facts is. And then it becomes much more complicated. Why did you learn 1632, Gustavus Adolphus Lützen? What's the big conclusion? It must have been a historically significant event somehow. It must have led to something because we have all learnt about it. The relational aspects, or even the more abstract understanding of this, making a conclusion of the whole, the sum of the parts, the qualitative understanding of it is often lacking when we measure like this. And through models like these, solar taxonomy, we can create observable learning outcomes. Now, this was, by the way, if you're curious,
good engineers should know communication, both written and oral. How do you write a good report? That was before AI. Now they know. So the report is not the problem. The problem is now how to assess it. That's another thing. We shouldn't discuss AI. But you
I think we
you end up there.
inevitably will. Yeah.
So yeah, in that network, we joined the network 2007, and before that we had an educational concept that we called that we had some mandatory courses that every student at an engineering program must take, and that could be project leadership, some economy, sustainable development, and things like that. So that's how it's started, and we're still working with the CDIO, because the knowledge when you're in such a network, and we think it's good, and when you are in a network, you always have to work with it to keep it alive among the teachers. So June 11, we have a specific day which is devoted to CDIO and pedagogy in general, where we have we will have discussions among teachers, and we will definitely discuss constructive alignment along with that.
Fantastic.
Presently, I'm as the director for the pedagogical development unit in Gothenburg. We are in the midst of a reorganization, and that means we have two units. We have one for pedagogical development, so the higher education pedagogics, and we have another unit for academic writing that supports today's students and also staff. And those two are going to be one new unit. And the new unit will only support teachers. So that means that academic literacy is supposed to be embedded to a much larger extent in the future in each program, rather than the university having a large central support unit for students, to which teachers send students who have problems in writing. Instead, the new unit will support and develop teachers' competencies in embedding academic literacy in their courses and in their programs. So that's really linked to the constructive alignment. And a lot of teachers are wary about this. They feel that they don't have enough knowledge about academic literacy. So the key is to get them to develop that in relation to their specific subject, of course, because knowledge is produced by writing in a lot of the disciplines. So that's what I'm going to work with for the coming years.
This is also interesting, because this is one of the observations that led us to create this new topic and theme. That with the change, perhaps ongoing change towards student-centered education, also comes thinking about soft skills and the development of transferable skills like these skills within each program and within each course.
Related to this, we now at the Committee for Education and Research Education have responsibilities as part of the cyclical evaluation that will assess student-centered learning. The SRF is doing SRU is doing some part of the job to define what that means, but we from our side also have to do that. And of course it's not, and it's connected obviously to the constructive alignment, the student-centered learning and constructive alignment, and as part of it. So it's quite challenging, because there are different aspects that we should take into consideration. So now what we are doing is that we are testing something on School of Health and see whether this student-centered learning, how we define it, and construct alignment within it, actually what we intend to measure or to observe. And we have not yet had the possibility yet. School of Health is just going through the first programs that are doing the cyclical evaluation, so we will see. Another aspect that we are dealing with is AI. Sorry, we have to mention that. One of the aspects within the constructive alignment is there is a realization that AI is an integral part of the education, or should be, and also of learning. So how do we capture that aspect in assessing the quality of education, both from student-centered learning perspective, but also from the teacher aspect? So that's on the NUF side. We have also an enormous work done in JIPS, and if I put another hat now on, where we are reshuffling the entire portfolio of all the new courses, all the new programs. And their discussion of constructive alignment is, do we have to view it as a per course specific, or is it program specific? And how do we make sure that when we miss something in one course, we compensate or make sure there is a progression enough between the courses that we can capture it at a later stage? Because we also know that the students, it takes a little bit of time for the student to realize the capacity and also process it. So where do we actually, so we need to think very metrics. And that's what we are dealing now with, which is a very exciting process, but it's very, very complex, because we need to have much closer cooperation between the teachers in specific programs, which is in a way good, but requires quite a lot of time. So, yeah.
Do you experience, when we talk about student-centered learning and the overall planning of education, from the small modules and courses towards programs, do you experience this, that there are conflicts created between what we're expected to do and what we perhaps need to do with the students that we have and the conditions that we have? We've talked about AI being one of these conditions, and the fact that for a long time, knowledge recall, for example, can be either, of course, studying traditionally and memorizing the information and learning to understand it, or getting it from Google or asking ChatGPT. Of course, there are different ways to do this, and depending on how much cognitive effort you put into this, you get different results. In this aspect, in the overall design exemplified here, are there challenges, barriers, conflicts somehow?
I think you're onto it. It's really, I think, the challenge is that I don't know what things are like in Jönköping. I know how things are like in Gothenburg. And it's very often a situation where teachers, it's me and my course, right? And I want to do the best in my course, and I have an idea, and it's related to my research maybe, and it becomes really about me rather than about the students and the program and what they're supposed to learn over the program. So it's really about creating teacher teams over the program and having a strong leadership for a program. And we have to make those people who take on leadership roles for a study program to have the time for it, but also to have the support from heads of department and from faculty leadership. Because that's in research tells us that particular leadership role is really undervalued. And it's people who are very often super engaged in students and in the education, but they don't get the credit for the work that they do, and they do a lot of work, important work. So you need to get also those people together in networks so that they can exchange experiences and knowledge about how to embed things in the program, and how so the key question, I think, is like, when do we need students to practice something? In which course? You can have students practice something in a course and don't assess it. You assess it in a later course, perhaps, and maybe you have to build different exercises through the program until you actually assess it. We have to look. Each teacher has to look beyond the boundaries of their own course. It's the first step, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And you started by saying something about conflicts, or when you develop a new program or a new course, for example, and we could definitely see that. Maybe not conflicts, but different opinions about this. If we go back 10 years at School of Engineering, all our engineering programs were 3-year, Bachelor of Engineering, Högskoleingenjör. And each department had 2 programs. And that was very much my department, my course, my program. So, but when we, 8 years ago, 2018, started a civilingenjörsprogram, Master of Science program, 5-year program, spanning over at least 3 departments. We had to see to the learning outcomes of that program, how to make a good civilingenjör. And then we need teachers from at least 3 departments. But one program manager, and we also had a tradition that every program belonged to one specific department. And the head of department had a lot of saying in designing the program and determining teachers, so on. But so that, I think we learned a lot about that process when we developed this program. And it ended up that we had the program, the lead of the program was central at my level. But I worked with teachers from different departments. Now we have 3 civilingenjörsprogram, and they belong to now that we are back to one department is the owner of the program. But we definitely have a lot of teachers teaching at programs at different departments, and I think that is good. That is vitalizing for the teaching.
I just want to say that educational leadership is not, it's a team effort very often, and I think that one of the reasons why there was now we start looking into the possibility to create a career ladder within pedagogics is to actually make sure that those individuals that engage in educational leadership, not only in their formal roles, but also informally, is actually being, credited. I think it's a very important message that we are trying to send, that if you're an excellent teacher in your one given course, and you see it as a castle or a bastion that nobody could come to, this probably does not signify either merited or excellent teacher. This is expected from a teacher, that you are excellent within your course. But if one can look beyond one's own course, see the bigger network, how this course fits into the entire matrix of courses, progression, how you interact with other people, how you benefit, not students of course, but also your colleagues. I think this is a very important core of the pedagogic career ladder, and that at least, I mean, what can I say? I just will be preparing the documents. I will not be deciding on this. But as far as I see, this is what constitutes excellence, when you see beyond something that you are only on your own course. So, and I think this is where the idea of constructive alignment and collegial learning and collegial influence and the cooperation with others, that's where it will be very much in the very center. Because many schools and universities have failed because they have given the excellent and merited teachers to those teachers that were very, very good in the classroom, or were getting extremely high course evaluations. I can tell you that the course evaluations I have had were not maybe very good, but then 5-10 years later, when they come to you and say, you know, best course I ever had before, that's what is, it's not this immediate short-term evaluation, it's a long-term impact we have as educators.
Sometimes I for my own mental models, so only for me, I've actually used solar taxonomy to think of different courses. That this first course, it's mainly concerned with one model, one thing, the first thing I need to know about this field and topic. Then when I progress to the next course, it's still really about models and concepts that I need to learn. But there are more of them now, and sometimes we might even compare them, and it's only really in the following courses that I can actually use this knowledge and apply it. But this is slightly foreign to us sometimes, because we think of a course as having to somehow progress from knowledge and understanding through skills and abilities to judgment and approach, and these very, very striving criteria in judgment and approach, where we sometimes I feel also struggle with putting that at a decent, reasonable level. I don't know if you share this view that this escalating stairs of how progression is viewed.
Yes, I definitely think that you need to think progression in terms of a whole study program. But within the course, it's the intended learning outcomes are not about progression. They're on an equal level, so to speak. You don't, I mean, you also don't even have, you don't have to have intended learning outcomes in all three categories. If it's not, but some teachers sometimes think they have to, so they put intended learning outcomes just because it's supposed to be there, not because they have an idea of what the actual purpose of this course is and actually what the students are supposed to know after the course is finished. So I think you have to be a bit careful in thinking progression within the course, related to the three categories. Of course, there's a progression in the course in students' learning, but not necessarily related to the three categories.
I just want to say that some universities today, what they are doing in different programs is a final examination. So you kind of examine the progression as a final exam. That sounds very Soviet to me, because I still remember the Soviet time and this idea of the final examination where you get there like, and usually it's in a professional education you have done that, like socionom or auditor or nurse. You have had this final examination that examines the entire 3 years of your study. Actually, it has produced quite interesting results. I know Kristianstad has implemented it at most of the programs, and it's a very interesting idea. I'm just throwing it here. It doesn't necessarily mean that we will be implementing it, but that's to put together things, to have a totality, that the students are examined on the totality of their, so it's not a master thesis or bachelor thesis, it's actually examination. Could be a way forward.
We're closing in on the end of this session, and I see that there are a few questions.
It's just a reflection. Now we have been discussing about all this constructive alignment within the program and within the courses and how the ILOs work. But one reflection that I'm having is like we are not talking about on the teacher level, right? Us here. But how do we transmit this? And I'm asking the experts in front of me. How do we promote this? How do we explain to students that the courses are have this progression? Because as the teacher, and I'm looking at my students right now, and several times I understand from them that they don't really understand that actually the program is a progression, that they need to take what they learn from the basis to the more ahead courses. So how do we transmit that to the students? What's the best way to let them, or make sure that they understand and they follow that line of thought?
How do we explain the constructive alignment and progression to students? This is actually a really good question, because transparency is really a criteria for constructive alignment.
It becomes very, very hard today. For example, many students think that AI can solve the different things. So when we start, just an example from my experience as a professor in accounting, when we start teaching basic accounting, basic management accounting, they say, but this can be done by the AI. And we have to constantly explain the T accounts. If they don't understand what is really, how do you do it technically yourself, it will be very hard in the next level to actually start assessing it. And even though AI could help you to assess it, you would not know, you would not be able to deeply understand the point. Why is it like this? So sometimes we let students fail, kind of. We let them, they go through the accounting course, they don't know why they have learned it, and then they fail in the next one. And then we start learning from failure. And then you start to explain to them, now you maybe understand why that was. And we explained that it didn't come through, okay, but maybe now. And then maybe it requires a little bit more effort in the second course, but that's what we have to do.
I think probably communication is a good way to talk to your students. The teacher team will have to agree on how to talk about this with their students, and if you do it in the beginning of each course, the course leader takes the student through the intended learning outcomes for the course and how they are related to the program outcomes, and maybe also get the teacher who is doing the next course to come in on this last session and sort of hand over to the next course, or ask students from the third year where the polletten har trillat ner to come and meet the first year students and sort of talk about their experiences and why, we also thought we didn't understand why, but now we realize, to get a discussion going between students, something. There are different ways.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to do, to explain the purpose of the program. What will you do when you get your degree? And one thing of the traditional way of designing an engineering program is that you start with a lot of math and a lot of physics maybe, and so on, and students struggling hard, and a lot of them fail, and then they continue the program. So, but another way of doing it is that you don't start with all the math. And for example, since we changed, not completely our program, but what we had, what we call Program Start 2025, we did a lot of changes. And one of the changes is that the math course now, if you take the Bachelor of Engineering, we have 8 programs. 4 of them starts with math still. The mechanical engineers, they are hopeless. They need the math but for example, the computational engineering and industrial engineering and management, they don't start with math. The industrial engineering and management program, they have the big math course in the spring semester. So they start the whole autumn semester with other courses. So I think that's one way to keep the interest up. And even if you start with math, and that's one of the principles in the CDIO, initiative that you should have what they call an introductory course, Introduction to Mechanical Engineering, where you go sort of explain the goal of the whole program and what will you do as an engineer, as a mechanical engineer, when you have your degree in 3 or 5 years.
And the continuous escalation, the building up, and the continuous explanation of things. Thank you very much. It is time to finish up. We will have some final words, just a few reminders from Elizabeth, but I think applause. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much for joining. It was a pleasure to have you here. And let's hope that we can keep this discussion going together. I just want to remind you that you can have a look at Educate's website, both to find the recording from this session, if you want to go back to the things that you were saying. And also, of course, to have a look at all the beautiful things that will be offered during the autumn. I won't say much more about that because I think you will have other things, considering that it's 1 o'clock, that you would like to do. Take care, all of you, and I do wish you, if I won't see you before summer, some lovely holidays. Okay.